Leaders shouldn't bother doing this unless their goal is to try to have employees that use their heads and hearts. So if you don't need their heads and hearts, don't worry about it. But if you do, they aren't just automatons that need to be running an assembly line and following a pace or something like that, then you don't have a choice. And so your challenge is to engage them. So you got to think again, what's the job of leadership? Most of us think that leaders are people that create a vision, they come up with great ideas. It's the Steve Jobs inventing the iPhone and all this. That's not leadership. That's individual contributors. Individual contributors sit in a room alone and come up with great plans. The job of leadership is intentional influence. It's creating a social system where people are motivated and able to achieve a mission. It isn't you accomplishing anything, it's you creating a culture and behavior where others accomplish things. That's leadership. So if you
Mhm.
can accomplish your mission without influencing others, good on you. Go for it. But if human beings are required, then you're going to have to think, how do I create a culture where they're motivated and able to do this? And the most vital behavior of all is people speaking up. It's people registering when they see problems. Remember the principle again. It's all about lag time. The lag time between when they see a concern and they talk about a concern. And so if you don't care whether or not that surgical tech who's putting a bone saw on a tray speaks up when he thinks, "Gosh, I didn't think we were doing an amputation this morning." If you don't care about that, don't worry.
So your short answer is very candid, but very respectful. You need to make this a priority, right? If you want to have any chance of succeeding. And I love your point about this is a point I often make, is you could have the best strategy in the world. If you can't inspire people to execute that strategy, doesn't matter how good of a strategist you are, right?
That's right.
You need to be able to inspire people. And so your point is this is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
If you want to be successful, you have to not only create an environment that's where people can feel safe, but actively encourage them to openly communicate and discuss and resolve problems quickly.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
maybe now I think you've made a very good case for that, better than I ever could imagine to, I think. So now how can we do it practically? If I do have 1,000 other things on my radar, like how can I make this a priority and do it effectively and consistently?
Yeah, first and foremost, you've got to ensure people have the skills. So people don't come into your organization comfortable. If they have to choose between safety and candor, they'll choose safety every time. If they're in doubt about whether or not this is going to compromise their career or their position in the organization, they'll say nothing. And so all you have to do to make people feel unsafe in your organization is nothing.
Mm,
And so if you want them to feel safe, if you want them to open up, number one, you're going to have to generate that safety. You're going to have to generate evidence for them that it's okay. And that means creating forums where they can speak up. That means rewarding people when they do. That means listening and acknowledging them. There's a lot you can do in a conversation itself to set the table for that, but there's a particular group in every organization that you ought to overinvest time in. And we talk about this in the Crucial Influence book. They're called opinion leaders. These
mm,
are people that everybody else looks to find out what works and what doesn't in this organization. They represent about 5 to 10% of your staff. And so finding those people and investing time so that they know it's psychologically safe to speak up with you, that brings the rest of the organization along. So that's a really important place to intervene. I once watched a leader who had struggled. He was trying to go through this cost reduction exercise with his group and getting nowhere. And so he did what he usually does. He brought them all together in a hotel ballroom, everybody from middle management on up. And he said to them, "Look, here's the business case. Here's why we have to do this." And you've all heard this before, but I just want to reiterate it. And then he clasped his hand, stood in front of him, and said, "Why isn't it working? I've been talking about this for 6 months. Nobody's voluntarily doing anything to try to help us meet this bogey." And it was quiet. I mean, crickets in that room for probably 3 long minutes.
mm.
And finally, a guy at the back of the room raised his hand and said, "Mike, I I know everybody in here is uncomfortable saying this, but you need to know that while you've been talking about cost cutting, the story's going around that you're having a second office built in our Virginia location, and the furniture alone is going to cost $400,000. It's a little hard for us to be motivated about saving pencils and printing on both sides of our paper when it sounds like you're doing this." Essentially, he called him a hypocrite right in front of the
Mm.
group. Well, this was a pregnant moment. I mean, every apologize for the French, but the physiology of this is every sphincter in the room clamps at that point,
Right.
mouths and ears and noses, and people are rocking back and forth and sucking
Oh
the
boy.
stuff in.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a terrifying moment.
Yeah.
And how Mike behaved in that moment was going to determine whether he had candor and openness and engagement or not in the future. And I was riveted on him. I was praying to the gods of organizational behavior and saying, help this guy get through this moment. And what he did is he took a deep breath. He looked across the room. He let the moment sit for just a second. And then he said, thank you for asking that question. He said, if you're thinking that, my guess is others are too. And that's a legitimate question to ask. If I and then he went on to explain that he was hypocritical, that he was having a second office built, and he hadn't managed that as well as he should. And you could see the openness happen, and then ideas began to come from the group. That one symbolic moment sent a message of psychological safety to others, and also a message that his ego was less important to him than the outcome, than the mission that he had stated before. And that was a turning point for them. And every leader faces those. So managing these symbolic moments, ensuring that with opinion leaders, like the guy at the back of the room that raised his hand, who is going to set the pace for everybody else there, that you manage those correctly, that can make an enormous difference.